Hi, welcome to the Rose Garden Press and 845 Press shared chapbook. Before I describe what's going to happen today, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you from my house in London, Ontario, which is on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the Neutral peoples. It's on lands connected to several treaties, including Treaty 6 London Township, Treaty 7 Sombra Township, Treaty 21 Longwoods, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. So that's where I'm coming from. Some of our authors, I think, will tell you where they're coming from. I always worry that land acknowledgements are important, but they can also be a little bit empty. So I'm going to drop into the chat the link to the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, an organization that advocates for the rights of First Nations children. It's a link to their What You Can Do page that includes places to donate, etc. So please follow that link and check that out. So welcome to this launch. We have 7 really wonderful authors reading today. We're going to start with Rose Garden Press's authors and then follow that with 845 Press's authors. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Rose Garden Press.
Hey, we're Michele from Rose Garden Press. Thanks so much to everyone who's joined us this afternoon in launching the 3 titles that we published this year. We're going to be hearing readings from Andrew French from his book Poems for Different Hues, Laurie Cohenskin's Blue Moon Orange Begonias, Patty Sinclair's The Rightful Skin. We're super excited to have our authors here with us this afternoon to read from their chapbooks. First off, we'll have Andrew French. Andrew French is a writer from North Vancouver, British Columbia. His first chapbook, Do Not Discard Ashes, was published with the tHemz Review's 845 Press in 2020. Andrew's poetry has appeared in journals across North America and the UK. He writes poems, book reviews, and hosts Page Fright, a literary podcast. So without further ado, we welcome Andrew French to do his reading.
Thank you so much, Michele and Michele. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces or names in the Zoom chat. It's always weird doing these online virtual things, but I'm so grateful to everybody who's come through today. Speaking of places and faces and names, I'm coming to you, as Michele mentioned, from North Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I grew up here. I have a lot to owe to the space that I've grown up in, and I'm very grateful to be able to be coming to you from this area today. Let's get into some poems. I wrote this chapbook, Poems for Different Hues, during the pandemic because I had no other way to connect with people that I missed apart from online ways. And so I wrote poems to them and oftentimes sent them those poems, and those poems compose this chapbook. There are also poems to artists I admire, and I figured I would start with one of those. This poem is called Down to the Brain, and it is after Leonard Cohen. L. I bounce my skull off hockey boards, rugby fields, the window of C's Camry. Swallow antidepressants at 15, sleep when the sun and pills weaken. It takes 7 years to learn that I'm avoiding something, at least 7 more before I learn what that is. I've thought of lingering in your monasteries, meditating, watching, shaving my head down to the brain with shaking hands. I've lingered in your words, read your pain. You, too, have lingered in my trauma. You say it will take 7 or more years for my body to clean and repair itself, be able to sleep without a drink. I swallow meds every night at 7, attempt yoga on the bedroom carpet, let my hair grow, the years pass until the shaking goes, too. The next poem I'm going to read is after my grandfather, who passed away in 2015, I think. It's called What a Life Is. J. I am an unknown number of years old in my last memory of you. I leave the room while you drink. Sundays coming like Vancouver rain, regular and heavy. When you die, I am too young to know what a life is, how to leave one behind. You die 2 generations, 3 floors, and a hallway from the room where I screamed into existence. Now we lift you out of the hearse, lighter, rolling a little, tipsy in the casket. I start going to church, visiting an unfamiliar God on Sundays, wishing peace be with strangers, holding hands like a lifeline, shaking them like a hangover. This next poem is also after an artist I admire. I wrote this during Kevin Spenst poetry course a couple of years ago and got some feedback. So thank you to everybody there for your feedback on this poem. I'm excited to be sharing it today. It's called Alden's Odyssey, and it's after Alden Nolan. I heard it was cold, eh? You did this on Saturdays. Snagged a seat to Windsor or walked the 32 clicks yourself. Icy roadsides, gloved thumb prodding the morning's crisp Nova Scotian sky. How'd the frost feel hitching a ride in your nostrils? What did drivers say when they picked you up, a scrappy, small-town bookworm? After a long walk with no company but a sore Pollux, whose spine hooked your iris from the library aisles? And what happened at closing time? Dropping Robbie's service back on the worn shelf, your arms heavy with other ideas to carry home. Sam McGee's cremation postponed. With all these words we've walked to evolving like roadside boot prints, which icy step made you realize the lines of your own on the shoulder behind you? Tails shrugged into the snow that refuses to settle between cities. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 more for you. This one I recently read on my podcast, which I'm just going to quickly plug because you can listen to an episode with my lovely publishers, Michele and Michele from Rose Garden Press that we just did. The podcast is called Page Fright. You can look up and find it. But I read this poem there and I'm going to read it again here. It's called Tree Hugging, and it's after Mary Oliver. M, how did you make so much of this world? I looked at a cedar this morning and thought you might appreciate its privilege, how it knows what lives above us while stretching its roots in soil like toes in warm sand. Is it that you made so much of this world, or that I have just made a habit of reducing it? People say trees have feelings, but I disagree. A tree can just be a tree. It might not have that great purpose we insist it does. It might not need to. I want so bad to know some part of this world means something. You can see and hold what you connect with, trees, your parents, a poem, but you can never see the connection itself. Feel it like a rough bark in your palm. I wish you could show me how to hold this life, squeeze every drop from it until my hands stick with the thick sap of existence. But you're somewhere beyond existence while we're here, staring at trees. All we can do is squeeze until the sap refuses to run. This last poem I'm going to read is for my girlfriend, Erin. It's called Spilling Over. I wrote this when I was about 3 weeks sober from alcohol, and it crept into the book. It's a bit of a downer, but I'm going to end on it because I'm very proud of this poem and what it signifies. So Spilling Over for Erin. Each day I find you pressing a pillow to your chest while morning spills into our bedroom. After I pour out my last beer, the day falls slow without you. My hands shake during the nights when you work late, unsteady, nothing to anchor me, trying to hold myself. You come home and bring sodas, juice, anything to mimic the feeling. Let me drink them while I cry on your uniform, insisting it's normal. This will be normal for the first week. Long nights, eyes searching the dark room, palms trembling. The whole time, I'll only believe I've got this because you're right there, holding my hand still, telling me that I do. Thank you so much for coming out, everybody who's here over the Zoom. This book wouldn't be possible without any of my teachers, my family, friends, or publishers. Both Rose Garden and my first chapbook was published with 845 Press. So thank you to Aaron and Amy as well for all of your help in getting me to this second chapbook, and Michele for bringing this to life.
Thanks so much for that, Andrew. That was wonderful. Next up, we have Lori Cohenskin. She is a writer and educator living in Ottawa. Her poetry has appeared in journals, anthologies, and online magazines across North America and in the UK. She was shortlisted for the Malahat Review's Far Horizon Award for Poetry 2018 and received honorable mentions in ARC's Diana Brebner Prize 2018, and also the New Quarterly's Occasional Verse Contest in 2019. Her poem Gravities was featured in the League of Canadian Poets in 2021 Poetry Month celebrations. Lori is a longtime advocate for the professional arts and their inclusion in schools. She is a founding member of the Ruby Tuesdays, an Ottawa poetry group that has been meeting weekly for 15 years. Blue Moon Orange Begonias is Lori's second chapbook, and we're super excited to have her reading with us today.
Thank you. Am I present? Hope so. Thank you, Michele and Michele. I'm toasting you fittingly with wine from Orange in a cobalt blue glass. And it's lovely to be part of this London launch and to read with these assembled poets. Rose Garden Press created this incredible vessel, this beautifully, richly textured book for my narrative poem. Blue Moon Orange Begonias is one long narrative poem divided into 6 short pieces. It's not typical of my work, which is generally lyric and often condensed and image-driven. Blue Moon Orange Begonias is a dramatic monologue that traces a woman's longing. It's dedicated to my women friends in theater for whom I've never written a play, but they are actors who own and inhabit their roles with all of their nerve. And they've inspired me to get inside a character and invent in the first person. And I'm indebted, of course, to writers of poetry and fiction that I work with, who share their work with me and who make my work much better. Their themes and characters are deeply human. I'm going to read 3 poems, the first 3 poems from the chapbook, without giving away the entire arc. Blue Moon, Orange Begonias. You noticed my orange begonias in the pot beside the door. Did I blush when I let you in? Did I betray the whim, the quickening wish that you had noticed instead my breasts? Begonias, Brazilian as Carnival, in that instant I undressed. My clothes abandoned, danced like revelers in the carnal swirling that consumed my hall. I stood before you, wearing only flowers, my trembling breasts a spectacle of orange begonia petals. The parade evaporated as swiftly as it rained. I put my wanton reverie away. As I would stake a rebel blossom or tuck my naked bosom into a camisole. 2. You noticed my orange begonias among the scarlet, the lemon and coral, ivory and rosé. And I felt you had distinguished something in me that leaves in the shape of wings would cradle and sustain me, would hold me as you could not. My NDP begonias, you reminded me I chose them for their color months before. Bright orange like the lawn sign that sprouted on its metal stem and wanted solidarity. I have never seen your garden, though I know your politics. Conjecture, an assembly of conservative blues, beds of forget-me-nots, legions of bachelor's buttons. But you are not a bachelor. That truth can't be concealed beneath a modest garment behind a garden wall. 3. You had come for lunch to celebrate the moon. Once in a blue moon, we had said, I returned to what was prudent. It was noon, and the moon was hours away from her evening performance. The blue moon is remote, I thought, solemn and distant, like something bequeathed and sparely delivered. We shudder under her legacy of glow. She's an open mouth with operatic precision, sounding only no. My begonias are suns. Their petals are warm and smoothly toothed as toddlers' smiles. They ruffle in the wind like wave-tossed bodies, buoyant in orange life vests. They're a convention of fireflies, of flame eaters' encore, a dalliance of orioles descending from the sky. Thank you. And thank you again to Rose Garden Press for choosing my work.
Thank you for that, Lori. That was really wonderful. Thank you. So finally, we have Patty Sinclair. And presently, Patty Sinclair dwells on the sacred land of Treaty 6 territory, home of the traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Nahiawak, Anishinaabe, Niitsitapi, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. Patty Sinclair's award-winning poetry has clocked miles on buses, floated in the airwaves of radio, is in residence with anthologies, journals, and chapbooks, and has been executed at poetry, music, and art festivals. And now we will pass it over to Patty. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Can you see me and hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Where to begin? You attempt to write like long fields of equally measured lengths, but each piece becomes a bunch of falling red and white handkerchiefs random in their landing. Or shall you acquiesce to what happened, give it time to find its legs, allow it to usher you home because it was so much bigger, where it was so much bigger than you. Waterborne. Like a jettisoned 7-pound iridescent bubble, flesh flushed eruption, head blazing rivulets. You break the surface, meet them skin to skin like a warm orange covered in cream. They think you are a boy in the shadows of the cord, last light of daytime. See the rightful skin that fastens you, contains you for this moment before it is cut. Playing house. This house, like a boat, rolls, pitches, is whipped by its sea. This basementless build needs to be battened. Woe betide, you become the torrent of gales buffeting the blisters of this locked-in erotic. Landing on shore now and again. Can you play it this way? Take a listen. Dreaming a new dream. We are surrounded by pink and white stargazers, trumpet heads announcing their pistols and stamens, and like flaming streaks from falling stars, their pollination perfuming and painting our skin. where we rest outside in a salty warm pool carved to the precise nature of our limbs, the water still as glass, and we would see into the night together, drink it up like an elixir, and it would streak down inside our blood, both moving and holding a stillness and peace, and our skin would be luminous, like the suns and suns and suns of now and before, where we lived together through countless dawns, sunsets, midday and sunsets and midnights. Our love toughened, but still tender as petals, bursting in aliveness, scent, and bound. Dream of our bright blossomed love remaining strong. Dream of its mastery. Smallest circle first. The silence of this windless day, shaded woods on thick green moss, heels held as you squat, palms together, fingers up, thumbs at chest, elbows out, knees apart. Ask the water for a song you can hear from under it. Though this day padded with cloud, top of the water still, you hear one squirrel in the treetop, one seagull cry, and out of the corner of your eye, something radiates on the skin of the water. You see the smallest circle first, its silent, solitary symphony on every chosen stroke, everything dropped into one's eyes, rippling. And before I end with my last very short poem, I just want to send a virtual hug to Michele from Rose Garden Press. You honor the poet's process. And again, thanks to Words Press and 845 Press for supporting poetry and poets. It's such a sacred job. Homing. You are arrested. The exultation of birds breaks open your chest. Finally, you are overthrown. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And as well, we just wanted to say thank you to WordsFest and 845 Press for inviting us to take part in this event. As well, we wanted to say thank you to the London Arts Council for supporting our project this year. Also, thank you to our wonderful authors for trusting us with your work and being so great throughout the entire process. Lastly, if you'd like to purchase any of the chapbooks that our readings were from today, those are available on our website, rosegardenpress.ca. As well, on there you'll find our submission guidelines, and we're currently reading submissions until March 1st. So if you're interested in submitting your work, yeah, please consider that as well. So thank you so much, and we'll pass it off to Erin.
Thanks. Thank you so much to everyone for those wonderful readings, and thanks to Rose Garden Press for sharing this launch with us, and thanks to Words for hosting us. I'd like to thank one other person before I start introducing our authors, and that is Michele Englert. Michele is a London-based poet and artist, and it's her capacity as an artist that I'd like to thank her. She did the art for the covers of all 4 of these chapbooks. So if you like the look of these chapbooks, if you think they look good, I think they do. I'm a little bit biased, but I think they do. That is really very much due to her and the wonderful artwork that she provided us for the covers. So thank you to Michele. We have 4 authors today, and I'm really, really proud to have published all 4 of them. They're very different, but they each have like really unique and really strong voices. So it's a real pleasure to have been able to see this work come into the world. Our first author is Nadia Froese. Nadia is a writer born and raised on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Her poetry and fiction has previously appeared in Phoebe, Bat City Review, and the tEmz Review. She graduated with a BFA from UBC in 2018 and is currently living and working in Berlin. for Chapbook is something spectacular. When I sent this out to ask for blurbs for it, it was kind of the middle of the pandemic and everyone was very blah and tired. So I got a bunch of kind of like, sure, maybe I'll look at it. I'm very snowed under kind of responses. And then as soon as people looked at the manuscript, got some very enthusiastic blurbs for it because it's really extraordinary writing. So it's my very great pleasure to welcome Nadia Froese.
Hi, wow, thank you so much, Erin, and I'm very excited to be here today. Yes, and I'm going to be reading the first poem from my book, Something Spectacular. It's also the longest poem, so I'm just going to be reading one. Yeah, and without further ado, I will begin. This poem is called Garden of Sleep. We get on a train to leave the laser of the city and stay on, legs up on the seats until we arrive. I watch the fields blend and we speak a little about the shouts we left behind, and after, when I get up to use the toilet, I sit back down and something about the roses that will be waiting for us when we arrive. It is dark when we finally get to the garden. The garden of sleep, I joke, because we fall into our beds. Sleep and sleep until mid-morning the following day, and the garden shakes its head at our sleep. The garden of sleep, I insist, despite this, and as we have breakfast outside, and like we'd said, the roses, the gentle air, and the feet up again on the benches. You dip your breakfast into your coffee, and when I suggest the lake, you say, oh, the hot car, sweat and getting dressed, and besides, the garden of sleep. And I say true. We sleep in the garden that afternoon, limbs in the sun, faces in the shadows of the squirrels. That night is the shortest of the year. You smoke a cigarette and we celebrate. We sit in the cloud. And later you say, garden of sleep, and I say, and of restlessness. I sleep that night and in the morning have patience for nothing else. The garden wants to play, wants us to sit and talk. The garden suggests reading or digging in the dirt, calling our friends in the city, organizing our books alphabetically, but I can't shake the impatience from my legs. I get up, sit down, get up, and you say, sit down. So I do and say, the garden of restlessness. What's going on, you say? And I admit to you that even though I longed for the garden for weeks, now that we're here, I can't stop thinking about how I miss the city. What about the city, you say? And I say the certainty. Well, you say, look around at the green. We breathe in the air together and it doesn't smell like your cigarette from the night before. The nights are getting longer, so you should be sleeping more. I say sleeping more, and the garden rolls its eyes, shifting under us, and we have to reposition our bodies. Garden of restlessness, I say. And later I say it again when hours have passed and we've only moved to change the side we are lying on, but this time it is something different. The clouds moving slowly across the sky. I've realized that the garden is restless, and that's what I meant when I said it. And it's making me uneasy, I say. When I'm not in the garden and not in the city visiting you, I live alone in a big house with a fence around it and a front yard and a forest next door, and it's really quite nice. One thing that upsets me though, I say, and I can feel the restlessness of the garden in my heart when I say it, is sometimes some people come by and they seem to be fixated only on one thing. Which is, you say. It is that I let them into my house. I'm not sure why. Because although the inside of my house is nice and full of things that I like, I always feel like, well, how do they know that it's things that they like? Those books, a plate with a cucumber painted on it that my mother gave me, my bathroom wall decorated with shards of a broken mirror, and besides, I have a fence that goes along the property, past a stream, along the outside of the forest. Some parts I've even painted pink. And really, I say, really, I have this dream. I've told you about it before. Yes, you say. And I'm telling you again now. I have this dream that someone wants to take a walk along the fence with me. But I don't want the fence to be the promise of the house. And I don't want the fence to be interesting because it guards the house. Really, I just want someone to come by and say, wow, what a nice fence, and take a walk with me. Walk along the fence and then go? Never come in, you say. No, I say, I guess. I want someone who's interested about the fence and only about the fence, because I am there at the fence with them, and I'm not in the house. The garden is still, and the clouds stop moving, and the ground under us lifts a bit like it's holding its breath, and I say, what I am most afraid of is someone who wants to go into the house while I am still standing at the fence. And has it happened before, you say? I answer, some people try, and it makes me so angry I could break a lot of things. At that point, you and I roll over and look up at the sky. Wait a minute, you say after a moment. You are not visiting me in the city. You live there now, no? I say, well, if we say that, then we could say we aren't visiting the garden. We live here now, no? And you blink and roll over again and put your face in your hands and say true. Okay, you say, I have another question. Anytime someone comes to visit you, not in the city and not here in the garden, I mean when you are living in your house, are you trying the whole time to figure out if they want to go inside? It's complicated. People who say they want to come in, I immediately turn away. Other people have absolutely no interest in coming in. Those are the people I like the most because it's easy. We talk and sit around in the yard. If it rains, we go onto the porch, sit on the pillows, and anything they ask about inside, I can bring out to show them. If they're hungry, thirsty, or need something, I'll bring them what they like. I love those people, and often I feel content, but sometimes I think it would be nice to have someone I wouldn't have to show everything to, someone who comes into the house. After I'm finished talking, we are silent for a while. And you say, well, I've lived in the city my whole life, and I can't say I know about fences in the way you are describing. I know about doors and locks, but it's easy for me to let people in, or maybe you say after a moment's pause, it doesn't bother me really whether or not people want to come in. People hardly even care to come in anyways. Most people I meet with, I see in the park, outside the corner store. So really, it's a different scenario. Yeah, I say, and I think about this different scenario, and it's helpful a bit to be taken out of my context, a bit of perspective. It's not about the thing, it's about for you, I guess, you say finally. And that's why it's not about comparison, me versus you. It's about me and you, and we are side by side or something. Side by side, having different experiences. Then we both think, wow, the garden has been quiet for a while. And you ask if I'm still feeling uneasy, and I say no. Maybe I was projecting earlier. Maybe it wasn't the garden making me uneasy, and you say, or maybe it's better said this way, you weren't projecting, but rather the garden is a projection, and the garden sighs, and I can feel my toes sinking a little more into the grass. What's all this then? About sleep and restlessness, I say. And you say, this reminds me about this dream I had last night. I was in this massive building, full of tunnels and slides. All I had to do was just keep going down slides to get to a lower floor. There was a stressful part with a child I met on one floor who kept running back and forth between the entrances of several tunnels instead of just picking one to go down. At the moment you say that, a bird starts to sing, loudly and a bit obnoxiously, but it's nice, and I think about back and forth, the constant flutter. That reminds me of the city, I say, and you say in a sense. But what about certainty? I think for a long time. Then I say, what I like about the garden is that it doesn't force any kind of immediacy, and that's why I am able to realize things. The constant flutter encourages the certainty, you say, but it doesn't allow for knowing. Not really, I say. City of sleep, I say, testing out the words. City of restlessness, you say, and the garden says finally, and lets out all of the air I didn't know it had been holding. And we both breathe in together, and at the point where our lungs should be full, they just keep expanding, and we fill up on air. That night, we don't want to sleep, and so we drive to the lake. It's cool in the car, and I can still smell a bit of the heat of the day on the seats. When we get to the lake, we are breathing deeply, and then we are standing side by side at the edge of the water. Something about the thin, wet line where the water meets the sand, and I start to cry. First quietly, and then heaving sobs. I look over at you, and we are both crying at the entrance to the lake. We look up at the glassy stars. We are both here, not restless and not asleep. Sometimes it's so hard, I say. Keeping track of it all, you say, the garden, the house, and the city, and now the lake. Thank God we came to the lake. Sometimes I say, I feel like there is no way I could ever get here. And now we are here. And I think, how lucky am I that I can go in? You dip one toe into the gloss. I lift my leg, foot up, toe pointed, and hold it, there, suspended over the water. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. That's such a good poem, and it's so nice to hear you read it. Oh, it's wonderful. Our next reader is Jeremy Luke Hill. Jeremy is the publisher of Gordon Hill Press, a literary press based in Guelph, Ontario. He's written a collection of poetry, short prose, and photography called Island Pieces, and 4 chapbooks of poetry: Poetry of Thought, CanCon, Trumped, and These My Streets. He also writes a semi-regular column on chapbooks for the Town Crier, and his writing has appeared in, I'm not going to read them all, but a very long list of Canadian literary journals that might be close to all of them. His book takes up the legacy of Leonard Cohen's Beautiful Losers in a way that, and I'll let him explain it to you, but in a way that I think is really valuable and important. I'll also just say that when he first sent me this manuscript, it consisted of found poems, and I suggested that he add some of his own poems to it and his own voice to it. And he went away and came back a while later, and what he'd done is added a bunch of collaborative essays to it, which worked even better than what I'd suggested and made for a really extraordinary book. So, Jeremy Luke Hill, take it away.
Thank you so much. I am wanting to start off first by thanking all of you for arriving here today and participating. It's really great to see a lot of names that I recognize in the chat. I also want to thank Kevin Heslip, whose name I thought I saw in the chat somewhere there, for passing this on to Aaron. When I was at that stage, I had no plans for it. He sent it, asked me to send it on, and then Aaron for taking that on and giving suggestions, and lastly for John Nyman for participating in the production of it, which was really great. I really valued his response. It wouldn't have happened without him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the first poem and the accompanying kind of essay there, because that essay stands as something like a preface, and then I'll give you another one from the book as a sample of what the book is like. So the first poem is called Everyday Explosions on a Street, and it's largely Leonard Cohen, shaped a little bit by me, but largely Leonard. Sometimes after I have come, or just before I fall asleep, my mind seems to go out a path, the width of a thread and of endless length. A thread of that is the same color as the night. Out along the narrow highway sails my mind, driven by curiosity, luminous with acceptance, far out, and like a feathered hook whipped deep into the light above the stream by a magnificent cast. Somewhere out of my reach, my control, the hook unbends into a spear, the spear shears itself into a needle, and the needle sews the world together. It sews skin to a skeleton and lipstick to a lip, sews a body to its grease paint, sews scars to mountains, sews through everything like a bloodstream, and the tunnel is filled with a comforting message, a beautiful knowledge of unity. all the disparates of the world, the different wings of the paradox, coin faces of problem, pedal pulling questions, scissor shaped conscience, all the polarities, things and their images, and things which cast no shadow, and just the everyday explosions on a street, this face and that, a house and a toothache, explosions which merely have different letters in their names. My needle pierces it all, and I myself, my greedy fantasies, everything which has existed and does exist, we are part of a necklace of incomparable beauty and unmeaning. And the response to that I've titled Captive Imaginations, it says this. I circulated an early draft of this chapbook with a preface describing how it arose from a rereading of Leonard Cohen's Beautiful Losers. And I explained that while the novel had retained its original power over my imagination since I'd read it first in university, it now felt problematic to me for a number of reasons, an experience that prompted me to start playing with the source text in ways that eventually became poetry. John Nyman, poet friend, and one of my early readers, responded by highlighting this constitutive tension in my process. I'm really interested in this kind of acknowledgement, he wrote, recognizing what's problematic and at the same time acknowledging how captivating it is, particular to one's own imagination. He strikes on a guilt that I often feel. I confess a tremendous fondness for Vladimir Nabokov's style, for example, despite his literary obsession with prepubescent girls. I also love the proto-magic realism of G.K. Chesterton's novels, despite his avowed anti-Semitism. I've been deeply influenced by Martin Heidegger's writings on language and thinking, despite the fact that he was a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party. And there's nothing to be gained, I think, in trying to reconcile these contradictions. Great writers can be, in part, even in large part, horrible people. It's obtuse to believe otherwise, just as it's obtuse to say that their writing is less great for that reason. As a reader, I can't avoid being located precisely there, in that contradiction, with no possibility of resolution, especially when I suspect that my fascination with these texts stems, at least sometimes, from a kind of complicity with their faults, that my appreciation of some parts of the text makes me complicit with other elements that I would otherwise reject. So I think you can kind of see the approach that I'm taking there, playing with Leonard and then writing responses to it and drawing some things from conversation with various people, particularly John. So I'm going to give one more example of that, a little shorter. The poem is called Accusation. I would like to accuse the church of ruining my sex life and of shoving my member up a relic box meant for a finger, of making me commit queer, horrible acts with other victims of the system, of killing Indians, of haunting automobiles and causing pimples, of building green masturbation toilets, of squashing Mohawk dances and of not collecting folk songs, of stealing my suntan and of promoting dandruff, of sending people with dirty toenails into streetcars to work against science, of female circumcision in French Canada. And the response is entitled Distance and Complicity. Part of what disquiets me about Beautiful Losers is the detachment that the experimental prose style creates between the narrative voice and even the most distressing subjects, incest, child abuse, indigenous genocide, female circumcision, at precisely the same time as it calls attention to the horror of these things. John notes something similar. The kind of voice I associate with Leonard, he says, takes so much distance from the hypocrisy it identifies. His labels, French, Indian, even Jew, despite Leonard's being a Jew himself, feel so distant, like it would be impossible to pin any of them on the speaker. I distrust this distance, even as I'm drawn into the stylistic virtuosity that helps create it, even as I recognize that reforming the source text serves only to create still more distance between the narrative voice and its subject, even as I acknowledge that this makes me complicit with what I find most disquieting in Leonard's project. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thanks for participating. I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate Aaron for putting this thing out there, and to WordsFest for hosting us. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Our next reader is Catherine Lewis. Catherine Lewis is a Hong Kong-born Chinese-Canadian writer and poet who lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Her work has been longlisted in the 2021 Creative Nonfiction Collective Society / Humber Literary Review Creative Nonfiction Contest. She is a graduate of the Writers' Studio at Simon Fraser University and the Vancouver Manuscript Intensive. Her book is called Zipless. I think maybe you can see on the camera, it's got really wonderful cover done by Michele Engler, really bright and vibrant. And the poems in this are tender and sincere, and they just crackle with energy. So it is my very great pleasure to welcome Catherine Lewis.
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Hi everyone. Thank you so much to WordsFest London for hosting us. It's a huge honor to read here for the first time. First off, I'd like to thank my publisher, Erin Schneider at 845 Press for taking me on. I've been so honored to work with you from the editing process through a design process, including with cover artist Michele Engler. The last 2 weeks have mostly been friends and profs telling me, ooh, I love the cover. And then they tell me, wow, great blurbs. So to my blurbers, my former professors, Amber, John, and Joanne Arnett, who held a space for me to write these poems in their classes at Douglas College and at the Writer's Studio at Simon Fraser University. And to my dear friend, Isabella Wang, who blurbed as well. You're all brilliant women. I was so deeply moved by your kind words about my work. And to everyone who supported my work, thank you so much. I'm stunned by the tremendous support that the first printing has sold out. Nadia, Jeremy, David, I'm so honored to be published alongside each of you. Each of your chapbooks moved me deeply. And I'm looking forward to receiving the Rose Garden Press chapbooks in the mail shortly. As for Zipless, Zipless is dedicated to everyone who has ever held space for me. My first poem is titled Red Shoes. Fitting to buy my first Valentino shoes on Valentine's Day, 2,000 miles from home, by Newport Beach's flaming orange sunset. As one stage in my fertility journey ends, today the 10th and final time ova are surgically plucked from my body without anesthetic, at this California New Age last-ditch clinic. I don't plan to care about ovulation again, no matter how this motherhood story ends. And mama needs a new pair of shoes to commemorate this day. Shiny, red, 4-inch stilettos, trimmed with spiky gold pyramid studs for several days take-home pay, which is insane. But one pair of shoes is more than I've ever had to show for all I've spent on fertility drugs. Girls' night out with new dance class friends, all unencumbered by motherhood. I walk 5 minutes in sleek maroon dress, red heels, binge on high-end steak cocktails at sparkling Yaletown Boîte. Before we hop to next night spot, watch friends fend off men who try to dance with us. As the girls pass for uncoveted cigarette on bus stop bench, they stare down at my feet. Kat, I can't believe you wore those shoes all night, they gasp. I swear I'm fine, I insist. Though big toenail throbs for weeks before falling off. It still hurts less than if I'd stayed in touch with old friends who became soccer moms and left me behind. Stumble home from my birthday dinner. Last selfie of red shoes capping off red skin-tight dress. Right stiletto now missing rubber tip, only raw metal left. For I had felt my stiletto catch between the cobblestones that get me every time. Cobbler refreshes both heel tips for a mere 15 bucks. Small price to pay to preserve last faint hope I once had of motherhood. The second poem I have for you all is entitled Terminological Quibbles. So you've had girlfriends then, she asks, Spanish red wine in hand. I don't think that's the word I would use, I reply. My bare calves tucked under a short skirt, politely sipping the same red on her roommate's cream brocade couch. I've had a lot of first dates, nothing that ever reached the level of a girlfriend. She claims me the rest of the night with experienced lips and hands, pouting as I leave her cubicle next morning. I'm too ashamed to admit no other woman has tried to kiss me. Online dating's stream of micro rejections filters you out before, after, pour over coffee. I swipe my card for us both before a waitress's card machine crosses the table. What, did you just pay for me? She exclaims. Thank you so much. I'll get it next time. And I'm surprised that there really is a next date, that when we're out, we plan to meet again. Like you, I'm up for anything, I say. She corrects me. I'm not up for anything. I'm up for love. I remain silent, stare down at her in bed, silence her with a kiss. This is the only time we speak of love in any tense but her past. Not once does talk spring from our lips about whether she's my girlfriend. At support group for late blooming sapphics, I try out the term girlfriend, cringe and giggle when I hear it falter off my lips. I don't know what to call her when people ask how things are going with this girl I'm seeing who asked me to come visit her back east during our farewell kiss at Denman and Davy. Last weekend at Dance Studios party, I spy a pair of ladies kissing, still of note outside queer women's spaces. I make conversation with the girl I don't know. Are you with our studio too? I ask. No, I'm dating Tara. Yes, of course. Have you tried our dance classes yet? No, I just moved here from back east. That's where my ex-girlfriend moved back to, I tell her. Only time I've let this phrase slip past my lips. Ex-girlfriend, the verbal marker that separates me from straight girls who use girlfriend for platonic BFFs, an accidental verbal affront to women who fuck when our relationships are mistaken for just friends. How to casually mention your unexpected orientation. According to Google, just say my ex-girlfriend, shorthand that I'm one of us. Each day of silence stretches us from being long distance, me secretly looking at airfare, to her being my ex-girlfriend who moved away and never got in touch again. I have one last poem for you all. It is entitled My First Date with a Writer. We swiped right on each other a while back. Never messaged her until now. Too busy letting my girlfriend break up with me, string me along for months. And so I walk up to this downtown restaurant tonight. My date's face false. Maybe I don't look like my online photos, though I do. Nothing 5 years old or 20 pounds thinner, exact same amount of tastefully applied makeup. She orders something vegetarian and hearty. I inhale entire plate of pad thai on my own in an eating contest where I'm the only entrant, letting food console me. We discuss work, education, family, other partners, and like every girl-on-girl date I have been on, I'm the only one without a graduate degree. My date's taken no writing classes, but she writes poetry and a little creative nonfiction, she says, exactly the same reality-based genres as me. I realize we'll both write about this date later. She'll say I wasn't political enough, I was prettier in my pictures, something was just missing. We are both about to become material. She is more enthusiastic when they come to refill her water glass than she ever is toward me, except when I secretly pick up the check. We'll probably run into each other soon enough. If I hadn't been sick, we'd both have read the same open mic last month. Polite side hug farewell at supermarket bike rack 90 minutes before sunset. I head home. On my living room floor, I spent half an hour lacing up brand new thigh-high boots bought online for dance class. But before I pull off these boots or journal one word about tonight, a text arrives from my date. She wants to be literary friends or friends, but hey, no pressure. We only said goodbye 46 minutes ago. She couldn't even wait 1 hour to reject me. On our date, she seemed so proud to have stayed in touch with her exes. I secretly thought she was crazy. It's not a skill I care for. Once one of us has rejected the other as a lover, I'm gone. No need to torture myself when your name pops up on my phone. Couldn't I just have been ghosted this week instead? And then my primary partner laughs at tonight's predicament. He says, at least that's a good deal dating a writer. One date provides material for two different authors. Well, fuck you, I swear back, and whack him with a pillow. My first date with a writer should also be my last. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to WordsFest London and to 845 Press.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's really wonderful to hear you read those. Our next writer is David White. It's our final author. David White was a participant in Renga, a collaborative poem In 1994, in completion of his PhD, he wrote A Territory Yet Not Yet on the Map, Relocating Gay Aestheticism in the Age of AIDS. His first solo collection of poems is The Lark Ascending, followed by Local Haunts. For many years, he taught theater history and writing at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. His chapbook is a meditation on the life of Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It is very much about the life of Tchaikovsky, and I think one of the things that most impressed me when I read it and continues to impress me is just how deeply attuned it is, not just to Tchaikovsky's life, but to his music, which is a really extraordinary accomplishment. So it's my very great pleasure to welcome David White.
Hello. So, yes, I started listening to Tchaikovsky in 1967, which was the summer of love. I was listening to the Beatles and Tchaikovsky, and my father brought home this record of this Fifth Symphony. And among the liner notes on the back, there was this mention of there's in Tchaikovsky's own handwriting throughout the score, there are these sentences which are very coded, but it's always been assumed that he was referring to his own homosexuality and the difficulty of being homosexual in Russia in the 19th century. And I've sort of it's been a part of my mind, my thought for decades now, that when the laws were passed in Russia recently, denying gay people from mentioning that they were gay, but taking place in Russia that Tchaikovsky ever was. So that's sort of what provoked it. Also, it's a short book, so I thought I would give the longest title I possibly could to it. So the actual title is A Meditation on the Life of Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky while listening to Symphony No. 5 in E minor, Opus 64, performed by the Boston Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Leonard Bernstein. And I'll read a part of the beginning, and so it's all just one poem. So I'll read a part of the beginning and then a part from the middle. And the section titles are the section titles that Tchaikovsky uses, and underneath the section title are those words in italics that Tchaikovsky put in his own handwriting on the script, on the score. So, 1. Andante allegro con anima. Murmurs, doubts, plates, reproaches against X. Introduction, complete resignation before fate. Deeply, from a place so low, dominated by double clarinets, arising out of the chasm, slowly, oh so slowly, a note, a pause, a note again, with strings and the slowly, rest of the orchestra. This is what is to be repeated. This is what is to be repeated. Now, and now as ever, the extended moment, prolonged, almost to the edge of suspension, infinity's decision, life or death. Deeply, the woodwinds barely utter the intricate, inarticulate profundo, deep pain of being because it cannot be. Tchaikovsky is not gay, declares Russian culture minister Vladimir Medinsky, May 2012 to January 2020, because otherwise he couldn't be played in Russia. Every note a piece of propaganda in violation of the law. The end of the first section and leading into the second section, I'll finish with. Oh my God, blast away, blast away, blast away brass, French horns included, knock against my breastbone. Don't let the deep, deep strings take me down. But they do. 2. Andante candabile. con alcuna licenza. Oh, how I love you. If you love me, shall I throw myself in the embraces of faith? Again and deeper, beginning lower, even darker. Oh, hope, can I hope? I cannot, but I will. I will rise. I will rise. I allow the solid light of horns, insist upon the possible, as slight as it might be, that hope might dwell among us, that we might see the glory in the slowly, yes, sad moments of a tentative now. Like woodwinds affirming, building into the yes, we can hope against all holding back, because we do not trust. We cannot ever trust faith. But for now, ominous, before restating the possible, that if we enter like a woodwind and oboe, light upon the breath, sustained until the gasping point, where the intake of another breath occurs. It's Leonard Bernstein conducting the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And look at how his life turned out. A chaos of desire and harmony. Loving father of three, all wrapped up in a marriage to a woman who let him, what choice did she have? Fuck other men as often and whenever he wanted. There is a moment now when this could almost be a love song. The most beautiful sound in the world, Peter Ilyich, so etched with sadness, articulate each exquisite moment. Peter Ilyich, I'll never stop saying Peter Ilyich, and beat against resistance. This too could be our resolution. How can anything ever be more beautiful than this moment here in the reaching of every instrument towards what might be. Peter Ilyich, a gale of brass, timpanis throbbing, but we are still swirl around in the possible, radiance rising, as if we could throw ourselves into the moment of acceptance of the fate that will be, but you throw yourself into the insecure embrace of faith. Question of the poem is whether Tchaikovsky died of the plague or of suicide, whether he was ordered to commit suicide. So it addresses that a lot too, but it's a long poem and it just goes on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I'd like to thank a variety of people. I would like to thank Josh Lambier and WordsFest for hosting this event. I'd like to thank Rose Garden Press for doing it with us. This is the second time around that we've done a co-launch with them, and it's really wonderful. And I'd also finally like to, I'd like to thank all of the writers who read. Just some really extraordinary readings tonight. I've dropped links in the chat to the 845 Press website where you can purchase our chapbooks. We have both hard copies and e-copies. Catherine Lewis's book has gone into a second printing, so if you do purchase that, you will need to wait a little bit for it to actually come back from the printers to get your copy, but it will come. And finally, I would like to, after thanking everyone who read tonight, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Thank you for being in the audience. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And thank you for giving us our time. So I think that brings us to a close. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope you enjoyed the poetry.